What if I told you the reason you're not wealthy has nothing to do with your income? Not inflation, not your job, not the economy, but a habit you were taught to be proud of. You were told saving is wisdom, that cutting costs makes you smart, that spending less means you're financially disciplined. But nobody warned you about the silent line where discipline turns into damage, where frugality becomes fear, and where being careful with money quietly keeps you broke. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't fail financially because they waste money. They fail because they refuse to invest in themselves. They avoid rooms that could change their thinking. They skip opportunities that feel too expensive. They delay decisions waiting for the perfect moment, and by the time they're ready, the moment is gone. And the most dangerous part? They feel responsible while slowly falling behind. In this video, I'm going to expose 7 hidden costs of being too cheap for wealth. Not the obvious costs you see on receipts, but the invisible ones that drain momentum, shrink opportunity, and delay success for years without you even noticing. You'll discover how trying to save small amounts can secretly steal your most valuable resource, high-leverage time. How avoiding certain rooms, conversations, and experiences quietly cuts you off from information and opportunities that change lives. Why what feels like smart saving is often just stagnation wearing a responsible mask. We'll uncover how cheapness slowly lowers your standards, not overnight, but inch by inch, until growth feels uncomfortable and mediocrity feels normal. You'll see why avoiding investments in skills, systems, and relationships blocks compounding and keeps effort high while results stay small. We'll break down how cheap thinking trains the mind to focus on fear and scarcity instead of strategy and expansion. And finally, you'll learn why minimizing short-term spending often leads to maximizing long-term costs, financially, mentally, and emotionally. By the end of this video, you won't just understand money differently, you'll understand your decisions differently. And once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. So stay with me, because one of these 7 hidden costs might be the exact reason your financial life feels careful, yet stuck. This video isn't comfortable. It wasn't made to flatter you. It wasn't made to make you feel safe. It was made to make you aware. Because somewhere along the way, many people were taught to survive, but never taught how to expand. They learned how to cut back, how to manage scarcity, how to avoid loss, but no one showed them how quiet habits that look responsible on the surface, can slowly cage ambition, shrink vision, and delay destiny. And the truth is, some of the most financially stuck people you'll ever meet aren't reckless spenders. They're careful, they're disciplined, they're proud of how little they need. Yet year after year, nothing changes. This video pulls the curtain back on why. Not with hype, not with motivation, but with clarity that might sting before it sets you free. As we move through these 7 hidden costs, you may feel uncomfortable. You may recognize patterns you've never named before. You may realize that what you've been protecting has been protecting you from growth. And if at any moment this message hits close to home, that's not an accident. It means you're ready for a deeper conversation about wealth, time, identity, and the decisions that quietly shape your future. So if this resonates, like this video, not for the algorithm, but because awareness deserves reinforcement. Share it with someone who's disciplined, hardworking, and still stuck, because this might be the perspective they've never heard. And subscribe to this channel if you're done with surface-level money advice. Because here, we don't just talk about budgets and savings, we talk about the invisible patterns that decide who stays careful and who finally breaks through. Stay with me. What you're about to hear could change how you see money forever. Hidden cost number 1. You exchange high-leverage time for trivial savings. Most people think being careful with money means being smart, but very few people stop to ask a far more dangerous question. What is this saving actually costing me? because somewhere between cutting expenses and being responsible, a quiet trade begins to happen, one that almost no one tracks. You begin trading high-leverage time for trivial savings. Time that could be used to learn, to build, to think, to position yourself for something bigger. Instead, it gets spent chasing small discounts, avoiding minor expenses, and stretching effort just to keep money from leaving your hand. At first, it feels productive. You feel disciplined. You feel in control. But control over small money often comes at the expense of big opportunity. Think about it. Hours spent comparing prices, days spent doing things manually because outsourcing costs money, weeks delayed because you want to save a little more before starting. You save a few thousand today, but you lose momentum, focus, and energy, and momentum is priceless. High leverage time is the time you spend on actions that move your life forward disproportionately. Learning a skill once that pays for years, building a system that runs without you, making one decision that opens multiple doors. Cheapness pulls you away from that. It keeps you busy but not progressing. You end up exhausted from activity but starving for results. And here's the part most people never realize. Wealthy people are not reckless spenders, but they are ruthless with time. They don't ask, how do I spend less? They ask, what gives me the highest return on my attention? Cheap thinking does the opposite. It treats time as unlimited and money as fragile. But time is the one thing you never get back. Every hour spent protecting small money is an hour not spent creating larger value. And slowly, almost invisibly, your world shrinks. You stay in survival mode. You stay busy. You stay careful. While others move ahead, not because they're smarter, but because they stopped trading future growth for present comfort. If this is hitting close to home, pause for a second. Ask yourself, where am I working hard just to save small amounts? What would happen if I protected my time as aggressively as I protect my money? Because the first step out of being too cheap isn't spending more. It's realizing that some savings are actually losses in disguise. And once you see that trade clearly, you can never unsee it. Now let's move to the second hidden cost, the one that quietly keeps people out of life-changing rooms altogether. Hidden cost number 2. Cheapness limits your exposure to opportunity and information. Most opportunities don't announce themselves loudly. They don't come with guarantees. They don't arrive labeled, "This will change your life." They show up quietly, inside rooms you weren't in, conversations you didn't hear, and environments you decided were too expensive. This is one of the most painful truths about being too cheap. It doesn't just save you money, it cuts you off from information, and information is leverage. Cheapness avoids events where thinking is stretched, mentors who charge for access, communities where standards are higher, experiences that force growth. You tell yourself, everything I need is online. I can learn this for free. I'll do it later. But free information is everywhere. Transformation is not. Transformation happens when you're exposed to new language, new benchmarks, new ways of thinking that challenge your identity. And those rarely come from staying in familiar spaces. Cheapness keeps you in the same circles, listening to the same ideas, repeating the same strategies, then wondering why nothing changes. And here's the brutal part. The people who seem lucky are often just better positioned. They heard something you didn't. They met someone you never crossed paths with. They saw a possibility you couldn't see, not because you lacked intelligence, but because you lacked exposure. Opportunity flows through proximity. Proximity to people who think differently, proximity to environments where growth is normal, proximity to conversations that stretch what you believe is possible. Cheapness avoids that discomfort. It protects your wallet, but shrinks your world. And when your world stays small, your thinking stays small, and your outcomes follow. If this is uncomfortable, it should be, because wealth doesn't reward isolation. It rewards intentional exposure. Ask yourself, what rooms am I avoiding because they feel too expensive? What information am I missing because I refuse to pay for access? How many opportunities have passed by simply because I wasn't close enough to see them? Cheapness doesn't just delay success, it hides success from view. And once you understand that, you realize why staying where you are feels safe, but costs you more than you think. Now let's move to the third hidden cost, the one that disguises stagnation as responsibility and keeps people stuck for years without realizing it. Hidden cost number 3. You justify stagnation as smart saving. This is where cheapness becomes dangerous, not because of what it costs you, but because of how convincing it sounds. Stagnation doesn't show up looking like failure. It shows up looking responsible. You tell yourself, I'm just being cautious. I'm waiting for the right time. I don't want to rush. And on the surface, that sounds wise. But beneath those words is often a deeper truth. You're not moving forward, you're standing still and calling it strategy. Cheapness gives stagnation a respectable name. It turns fear into planning, inaction into discipline, delay into smart saving. Months pass, then years. You're still researching, still preparing, still almost ready. But wealth doesn't come from almost. Progress requires movement, not perfect conditions. The people who grow don't wait until uncertainty disappears. They learn how to move with it. Cheap thinking, however, demands safety first. No risk, no discomfort, no chance of loss. And the price of that safety is momentum. Because every delay quietly compounds, just like money, but in the opposite direction. While you're saving, the market moves. While you're waiting, skills become outdated. While you're being careful, others are gaining experience. And experience is something you can't download later. The tragedy is this: you can work hard, save diligently, and still go nowhere. Not because you're lazy, but because you mistook stillness for wisdom. Ask yourself, how long have I been almost ready? What decision have I been postponing in the name of being careful? Am I truly preparing or just avoiding discomfort? Because smart saving should support progress, not replace it. And when saving becomes an excuse to stay where you are, it stops being smart. It becomes a comfortable trap. Next, we'll uncover how cheapness doesn't just slow growth, it quietly lowers your standards until staying small feels normal. Hidden cost number 4. Cheapness quietly rewrites your standards downward. There's no single moment where you say, I've lowered my standards. It happens quietly, gradually, almost politely, one small compromise at a time. You choose the cheaper option, just this once. You tolerate inefficiency. It's not that bad. You accept inconvenience. I can manage. And nothing breaks immediately. So you do it again and again, until one day, what once felt unacceptable now feels normal. That's the danger of cheapness. It doesn't just affect what you buy, it reshapes what you expect. You stop demanding quality. You stop expecting excellence. You stop designing your life around growth. Not because you don't want more, but because you've trained yourself to live with less. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Wealth responds to standards, not effort. Two people can work equally hard, but the one who demands better tools, better systems, and better environments will move faster every single time. Cheapness chooses struggle over efficiency. effort over leverage, endurance over optimization. It convinces you that working harder is noble, even when working smarter is available. Over time, this mindset leaks into everything: the quality of your work, the environments you tolerate, the conversations you accept, the future you believe you deserve. And slowly, ambition becomes inconvenient. You stop asking, what's the best way, and start asking, what's the cheapest way? But the cheapest way often comes with the highest hidden cost, because it teaches you to accept limitations instead of challenging them. Ask yourself, what have I normalized that used to feel unacceptable? Where have I chosen inconvenience instead of improvement? Have my standards grown or quietly shrunk? Because once your standards drop, growth doesn't just slow, it resists you. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to imagine more. Next, we'll uncover how cheapness doesn't just lower standards, it blocks compounding in skills, systems, and relationships where real wealth is built. Hidden cost number 5. You avoid compounding investments in skills, systems, and relationships. Most people understand compounding when it comes to money. Very few understand it when it comes to life. Because the biggest compounding assets aren't stocks or real estate, they're skills, systems, and relationships. And cheapness avoids all three. Why? Because compounding investments rarely feel rewarding at the beginning. They require upfront effort, patience, and faith, with no immediate payoff to justify the expense. So, cheap thinking asks, what do I get right now? But wealth asks, what keeps paying me long after the effort is done? When you avoid investing in skills, you stay dependent on outdated abilities. You work harder just to remain relevant. You hustle to compensate for what leverage could have solved. When you avoid building systems, you become the system. Every task needs your presence. Every outcome depends on your energy, and energy fades. When you avoid investing in relationships, mentors, partners, communities, you try to figure everything out alone, and isolation is expensive, because every mistake you make alone has already been solved by someone else, someone you could have learned from if you were willing to invest in proximity. Cheapness sees these investments as costs, but they are multipliers. One skill can open doors for decades. One system can free thousands of hours. One relationship can shift your trajectory overnight. Avoiding them doesn't save money, it delays compounding. And delayed compounding is devastating, because while you're protecting your cash, time keeps moving. Others are stacking skills, automating processes, building networks that exchange information, opportunity, and trust, and the gap widens quietly. Ask yourself, what skill have I postponed learning because it felt too expensive? What system could reduce my effort but requires investment up front? What relationship could stretch me if I was willing to step in the room? Cheapness avoids long-term thinking, but wealth is built where patience meets leverage. And when you miss compounding early, you don't just lose growth, you lose exponential advantage. Next, we'll uncover how cheapness doesn't just affect what you invest in. It trains your mind to see scarcity instead of strategy. Hidden cost number 6. Cheapness stops being a financial habit and becomes a mental operating system. Because every decision you make trains your brain what to look for. And cheapness trains the mind to look for threats, not possibilities. Over time, you stop asking, how do I grow this? And start asking, how do I avoid losing? You analyze risk more than reward. You obsess over cost instead of value. You focus on what could go wrong before asking what could go right. That's not strategy, that's scarcity. Scarcity thinking narrows vision. It makes you defensive, reactive, short-term. You become excellent at preservation and terrible at expansion. And the danger is subtle, because you can feel intelligent while shrinking your future. Cheapness rewards caution, but wealth rewards clarity and courage. Strategic thinkers don't ignore risk. They price it, manage it, and move anyway. Scarcity thinkers freeze. They wait for certainty. They need guarantees. They want zero downside. But certainty is expensive and rarely available where growth lives. Over time, cheapness conditions the nervous system to stay tight. Every expense feels like loss. Every investment feels like danger. Every opportunity feels suspicious. And when your mind is trained this way, even good opportunities feel uncomfortable. You hesitate, you second guess, you talk yourself out of growth. Not because it's wrong, but because it stretches you beyond familiar limits. Ask yourself, do I instinctively see cost before value? Do I focus more on protecting what I have than creating more? Has my thinking become defensive instead of directional? Because wealth isn't built by avoiding mistakes alone. It's built by making strategic decisions repeatedly, even when they feel uncomfortable at first. Cheapness teaches you to survive. Strategy teaches you to expand. And if your mind stays trapped in scarcity, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. Finally, we come to the last hidden cost, the cruel irony where trying to save today quietly creates a much heavier bill tomorrow. Hidden cost number 7. You minimize short-term spending and maximize long-term cost. This is the final irony, the moment where cheapness reveals its true price. Because in trying to spend less today, you often end up paying more tomorrow, financially, mentally, emotionally. Cheapness avoids the upfront cost, the quality tool that lasts, the skill that prevents mistakes, the system that saves years, the health investment that preserves energy. So you choose the cheaper option, and at first it feels like a win. But then the replacements begin, the breakdowns, the inefficiencies, the repeated mistakes. You pay again and again and again. What you saved in money, you pay back in time, stress, and regret. Cheapness also delays learning. Instead of investing early and failing small, you avoid action, then make bigger, more expensive mistakes later. Mistakes that cost reputation, confidence, momentum. And some costs never show up on a receipt. Burnout, health issues, missed windows of opportunity, years spent fixing problems that could have been prevented. Being cheap doesn't eliminate cost, it postpones it. And postponed costs almost always arrive with interest. Wealthy thinkers understand this deeply. They spend once to solve a problem. Cheap thinkers pay repeatedly to manage it. And that's why cheapness feels safe in the moment, but expensive over a lifetime. Ask yourself, where am I avoiding a small cost that could prevent a much larger one? What am I repeatedly paying for because I refuse to invest up front? What would change if I focused on total lifetime cost, not immediate price? Because wealth isn't about spending recklessly, it's about spending deliberately in ways that reduce friction, increase leverage, and protect the future. When you see money as a tool, not a threat, you stop fearing expenses and start designing outcomes. And that's the shift that separates survival from true abundance. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to pause for a moment, because this wasn't just a video about money. It was a mirror showing how small, quiet decisions, the ones we justify as being careful, can slowly shape an entire future. Being cheap doesn't make you disciplined, it doesn't make you wise, and it doesn't make you safe. It only feels that way until you see the cost. The cost in time you'll never recover, the cost in opportunities you never stepped into, the cost in growth that was delayed not because you couldn't afford it, but because you were afraid to invest in yourself. And the truth is, you don't need to spend recklessly to build wealth. You just need to stop letting fear disguise itself as responsibility. Wealth begins the moment you stop asking, how do I hold on to what I have, and start asking, how do I grow into what I'm capable of? If something in this video resonated with you, if it challenged you, unsettled you, or made you think differently, that's a sign you're ready for more. Thank you genuinely for staying all the way through. Your time matters, and I don't take that lightly. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Which of these hidden costs hit you the hardest? Where do you realize being too cheap may have held you back? If this message added value, like this video so more people can find it. Share it with someone who's hardworking, disciplined, and still stuck. This perspective might be what they need to hear. And subscribe to this channel for more captivating revelations about money, mindset, and the invisible patterns that decide who stays careful and who finally breaks free. Until the next video, spend intentionally, think strategically, and remember, some costs don't show up on receipts, but they shape your entire life. I'll see you in the next one.